Sometimes a person does not die when they stop breathing, but when they spend years living like a useful shadow in other people's lives, neglecting themselves, always there to solve, to listen, to hold everything together, to understand, to not be a burden, to not ask for too much. While inside, something slowly loses its voice, and the most painful part is that almost no one notices, because as long as you keep functioning for others, almost no one, perhaps no one, will ask whether you are still living for yourself. What part of your life have you given away, hoping that someone, someday, would finally recognize your worth? You are unique. You have immeasurable value, but perhaps you have not been able to see it. There is a way of disappearing that makes no noise. You do not leave a house, you do not cut off a bond, you do not announce a breakup. You simply begin postponing your desires, postponing your peace, postponing your body, postponing your dreams, until one day you realize that this later has swallowed entire years. Do not allow it. Do not wait for them to recognize your worth only once you are gone, because beginning to live for yourself is not selfishness. It is reclaiming the basic right to not be a secondary guest in your own existence. Do you really want to be a guest in your own life when you are the main character? If this is your first time here, I'm Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. In this video, we're going to walk through 7 points that will help you understand why waiting for recognition can steal your life, how constant availability becomes a habit, why choosing yourself can feel like guilt, and how Stoicism, an ancient wisdom more than 2,000 years old, can give you clarity, character, and inner mastery, so you can take your rightful place again without becoming bitter. Before we continue, remember that you can now download the Stoic Library of Self-Respect, a collection of my 5 books on applying Stoic wisdom to family, difficult relationships, loneliness, and boundaries. The link is in the description or at thestoicgarden.com. Now let's begin. Think about this. There comes a moment in life when something breaks inside you without any visible tragedy taking place. There are no screams, no doors slammed, no dramatic scene to explain the exhaustion. You are just there, doing what you always do, answering the way you always answer, carrying what you always carry, and suddenly a strange feeling catches up with you. You have spent years functioning, but not necessarily living. You have been needed by many, useful to several, understanding toward almost everyone, but perhaps far too absent from yourself. And that brings us to the first truth in this journey. The day you realize you have been living invisibly inside your own life. That invisibility did not begin all at once. No one wakes up one morning and decides to erase their own name from their story. It begins with small, reasonable sacrifices, almost noble ones. Today I will say nothing so I do not create conflict. Today I will give in because the other person is going through a hard time. Today I will postpone my own things because something else is more urgent. Today I will not ask. I will not complain. I will not make anyone uncomfortable. I will not need anything. And of course, from the outside you look mature, calm, generous. How admirable it looks to be the functional adult in the room, while inside you keep accumulating a life no one ever asked whether you wanted to live. The problem is that every sacrifice leaves a mark. At first it seems tiny, almost invisible. An afternoon that was not yours, a decision you did not make, a conversation you avoided, a desire you hid so you would not seem selfish. But over the years, those marks form a kind of map, and when you look at it honestly, you discover something that hurts more than anyone else's contempt. Many times, it was not the world that erased you first. It was you who learned to step aside so others could be comfortable. And then comes the question you can no longer keep avoiding. At what point did you begin to live as though your presence only had value when it served someone else? When did it become normal for your needs to be last in line, as if your exhaustion mattered less than other people's discomfort? Because that is the trap of the person who gives too much. They do not only give their time, energy, or affection, they also give permission to be treated like a useful extension, like an available resource, like that safe place everyone returns to when they need something, but rarely when they simply want to see you. The cruelest part is that many people will not notice your disappearance as long as you keep fulfilling your role. If you keep answering, helping, giving in, fixing things, and half smiling, everything will seem to be in order. No one will sound an alarm because the system is still working, and there lies the irony. You can be emotionally exhausted, spiritually empty, deeply alone, But as long as you do not interrupt the service, many will continue believing you are fine. Some will even call you strong when in reality you simply got used to never asking for help. That is why this realization hurts so much, because it forces you to look at your life without decorations. It forces you to admit that perhaps you were waiting for someone to come rescue you from an invisibility you yourself had been feeding, out of fear of disappointing others, fear of losing affection, fear of no longer being indispensable. But no one can give you back a life you keep handing over without limits. No one can truly see you if you keep acting as though your own place is negotiable. And once you have seen this, it is no longer enough to know that you became invisible. Now you must understand what kept you waiting for so long. Notice this. Waiting has a noble appearance. It looks like prudence, like faithfulness, like real love, the kind that endures, that understands, that does not walk away at the first sign of weariness. That is why it is so dangerous. Because few prisons are harder to recognize than the ones decorated with virtues. You can spend years telling yourself that you are only giving it time, that sooner or later that person will understand, that one day they will open their eyes, that a gesture of recognition will arrive when you least expect it. And that brings us to the second point of this video, the waiting that steals your life while disguising itself as patience, loyalty, or love. There are kinds of waiting that ennoble us, of course. Waiting for someone to heal, waiting tenderly through a process, waiting without pressuring what needs time to mature. But there is another kind of waiting, very different, one that is not born from wisdom but from fear. Fear of letting go of an illusion, fear of admitting you gave too much, fear of discovering that perhaps the other person was not confused but comfortable, fear of accepting that someone who does not value you may not need more time. Perhaps they only need to keep benefiting from the fact that you mistake enduring for loving. Seneca, that Roman thinker who looked at the brevity of life without sentimentality, wrote that we do not have too little time, but that we lose much of the time we have been given. That sentence carries a different weight when you apply it to your relationships, because life is not lost only in empty distractions. It is also lost waiting for calls that never come, apologies that are never born, changes that are always promised and never embodied. It is lost staring at someone's emotional door as they come and go whenever they please, while you remain there, loyal, available, almost decorative. A statue of patience, yes, very respectable, and also very exhausted. Misunderstood waiting has a silent mechanism. It convinces you that moving would be betrayal. It tells you that choosing yourself would be abandonment. It repeats that it is still not the right time, that maybe one more conversation is needed, one more chance, one more proof of your goodness. And so your life slips away in extensions. How many times did you call something hope when, deep down, it was fear of accepting reality? How many times did you defend the possibility that someone might change, so you would not have to make the decision to change your place in relation to that person? The hardest part is that this waiting ends up distorting your inner sense of justice. You begin to justify what once would have clearly hurt you. You get used to receiving crumbs of attention and interpret them as profound signs. A short message after weeks of indifference becomes proof of affection. A lukewarm apology without real change seems like progress. A minimal gesture sustains you for months more. And of course, the other person does not have to do much. By giving you just enough so you do not leave completely, they keep the system alive. How convenient your patience becomes when no one else has to pay its price. Stoicism does not ask you to act from resentment. It asks something much harder of you, to look at the facts without covering them with desire. If a person only recognizes your worth when they are afraid of losing you, that is not always mature love. Sometimes it is attachment to the comfort you represented. If someone needs to see you on the verge of leaving in order to treat you with a little more care, perhaps they were not blind. Perhaps they simply had no reason to change while you were still there, holding the relationship together with your own sacrifices. And this is the part that is hardest to accept. Every day you spend waiting for someone else to wake up, may be another day you remain asleep in front of your own life. Not because loving is wrong, not because loyalty has no value, not because patience has no beauty, but because no virtue deserves to become an excuse for abandoning yourself. Once this waiting is understood, the next step hurts even more, because it reveals why so many people do not learn to respect you while you remain so easy to have around. There is a silent way of teaching others how to treat you, and it almost always happens without you saying a single word. Every time you accept less than you deserve, every time you answer even when you are exhausted, every time you make yourself available again after being ignored, you are teaching a lesson. Not the lesson you would like to teach, of course, but you are teaching it. You are showing them that they can delay you, fail you, use you, leave you at the end of the line, and still find you in the same place with the same patience, with the same open door. We have reached the third point of this journey, and it is this: why others will not learn to respect you while you remain so easy to have around. Comfort is one of the great enemies of respect, not because closeness is bad, and not because love means becoming unreachable, but because anything without an edge eventually gets stepped on without awareness. A person who knows you will always be there feels no urgency to take care of you. A person who knows you forgive without consequence feels no need to examine their behavior. A person who knows they can disappear, come back, ask, receive, and face no change in how you treat them learns something very simple. With you, they do not have to try very hard. This hurts because it contradicts a very common fantasy. Many people believe that if they are kinder, more patient, more understanding, more generous, they will eventually be valued more. It sounds beautiful, almost charming enough to stitch onto a pillow and give away at a family gathering. But human life does not work that way. Sometimes the easier you are to have around, the less they see you. The more you adapt, the less they consider you. The more you avoid making others uncomfortable, the easier it becomes for them to ignore the fact that you, too, have limits, exhaustion, desires, and a life that was not born to revolve around their needs. Unconditional availability creates habit, and habit rarely awakens gratitude. Habit consumes, habit uses without looking. Habit does not stop to think about the cost of what it receives because it receives it as part of the scenery. How many times did someone only notice your presence when you finally stopped responding the same way? How many times did your silence carry more weight than entire years of obedient presence? Not because silence is magic, but because it interrupts the pattern. And when a pattern is interrupted, the other person's awareness at last is left without its usual comfort. Some people are not obviously cruel. They are not planning to destroy you. They do not wake up thinking about how to wear you down. They simply discovered that with you, they could receive a lot without giving much. And because you do not correct the dynamic becomes established. They look for you when they need something. They listen to you when it suits them. They promise change when they sense you might be getting tired. Then, when everything goes back to normal, they return to the same lukewarm behavior as always. How curious that some people remember your importance at the exact moment your usefulness seems to be at risk. Respect is not built by explaining over and over again that you deserve respect. It is built by no longer participating in situations where your value is being reduced to availability. This is not about punishing anyone, becoming cold, or creating a theatrical absence so someone suffers. It is about something more sober and more difficult, removing automatic access to you. Stop responding from guilt. Stop showing up by reflex. Stop acting as if your presence were a lifetime guarantee for those who never learned how to care for it. Because as long as you are easy to have around, many will not see a person. They will see a resource that still works. And here begins a more serious form of dignity. Not the dignity that shouts, threatens, or puts itself on display, but the kind that changes behavior. The kind that understands that if someone only learns when they lose convenience, perhaps they were never learning from your love. They were simply benefiting from your lack of boundaries. But if this already seems clear, there is still something else to look at. What happens inside you when years of postponing yourself begin to take their toll? At this point, I want to tell you something. This channel can open a door, but you are the one who must walk through it with practice, decision, and consistency. To support you on that path, I prepared 5 books where I bring together Stoic teachings, exercises, and reflections to apply in the moments when it is hardest to remain calm and preserve your self-respect. You can see them by visiting thestoicgarden.com. Before we continue, write in the comments, "I walk with wisdom," along with the country you are listening from. Let's continue because there is still a very valuable part of this video ahead. For a long time you can convince yourself that nothing is happening. that it does not matter if you give in again, stay quiet again, wait again, leave your own things for later again. You can put on a calm face, use reasonable words, act as if everything is under control. But the soul keeps its own accounts, even when you try to tear up the receipts. What is not expressed clearly does not disappear. It gathers in a dark place where one day it begins to weigh on you. And that brings us to the fourth truth of this path, the silent resentment that grows inside those who always put themselves last. That resentment does not usually appear as hatred at first. It appears as exhaustion, as a brief irritation, as a strange dryness when someone asks you for something again, as a sting when you hear the tone of someone who complains to you without ever having looked at what you have been carrying. Then you begin to feel bad for feeling it, because for years you defined yourself as someone good, patient, strong, capable of understanding everything. So it is not only what others do that hurts you, it also frightens you to discover what it is awakening inside you. And here it is worth being very honest. Resentment does not always mean you are a bad person. Many times it means your inner life has spent years trying to warn you that something is out of order. It is a sign that you have given more than you could give without breaking. A warning that your generosity stopped being free and began turning into obligation. How could something bitter not grow inside a person who got used to saying yes while deep down they wanted to rest, step back, breathe, or simply be taken into account, Seneca, who understood very well the fires of the human spirit, warned that anger promises strength, but in reality hands control of the soul to the blindest part of us. He did not say this to deny anger, but to remind us that an ungoverned emotion eventually takes over the whole house. Resentment works the same way. At first, it seems to give you energy, a kind of hard clarity. It tells you that you have seen too much, given too much, that no one deserves anything anymore. But if you do not look at it with discipline, it ends up distorting even what could still be healthy. Because the danger of resentment is not only in feeling it, it is in allowing it to become your new identity. Then you no longer set boundaries from clarity, but from an accumulated bill. You no longer speak to put things in order, but to collect what you feel is owed. You no longer take distance to recover peace, but to punish in silence. And of course, after years of feeling used, it can seem fair. It even sounds elegant to say that you simply got tired. But if exhaustion does not become discernment, it becomes hardness. And when hardness settles in, it does not clearly distinguish between the person who hurt you, the person who made a mistake, and the person who simply arrived late to a life that was already wounded. Some people go from overgiving to contempt, as if there were no middle ground. First they erase themselves so everyone else can be fine. Then they explode inside and decide that no one deserves anything. That swing is not freedom. It is still being governed by others, only now from the opposite side. Before, your life depended on pleasing them. Now it depends on reacting against them. What a lovely change of prison with brand new windows and all. But a prison nonetheless. Stoicism asks for something harder than exploding or pleasing. It asks you to regain command over your own response. That is why you need to listen to that resentment without blindly obeying it. Ask yourself what it is pointing to, what boundary was missing, what conversation you avoided, what part of you was abandoned for far too long. Not to blame yourself, but to correct your course before bitterness starts speaking for you. Because a postponed life is not recovered by poisoning yourself against those who did not value it. It is recovered by making firm, sober, concrete decisions before pain turns you into a version of yourself you no longer recognize. And once you see that inner bill, the hardest step of all appears. Choosing yourself without feeling as though you are betraying the people who got used to your self-abandonment. There is a strange moment when you decide to do something healthy for yourself, and even so, your body experiences it as if you were doing something wrong. You say no, and guilt appears. You protect your time, and guilt appears. You stop replying instantly, and guilt appears. You set a small boundary, almost polite, almost timid, and still you feel as if you had abandoned someone in the middle of a storm. That reaction does not prove you are doing something wrong. It proves how deeply your life was trained to feel right only when it was available to others. We have reached the fifth point of this journey, when beginning to choose yourself feels like betrayal, but is actually justice. The guilt of someone who has put themselves last for years has its own logic. It does not appear because you have been cruel. It appears because you are breaking an invisible contract no one signed, but everyone benefited from. For a long time, you occupied a clear role, the one who understands, the one who waits, the one who does not demand too much, the one who can handle everything, the one who adapts. And when you begin to step out of that role, others become uncomfortable, yes, but so do you. Because a part of you still believes that love means remaining accessible even when something inside you cannot take it anymore. That is why choosing yourself does not feel like freedom at first. It feels like danger. As if you were about to lose affection, cause disappointment, seem ungrateful, become someone you do not want to be. The mind throws images at you of rejection, arguments, judgment, distance, and then the old temptation appears again, to give in order to calm the anxiety. To say yes to avoid the weight of holding a no, to return to the familiar role because, even if it wears you down, at least you know how it works. What an admirable skill some people have, calling it peace to remain in the exact place that is slowly dimming their light. But there is a question you cannot avoid forever. Who are you really betraying when you refuse to live for yourself? Others, because you no longer give them unlimited access to your time, your energy, and your patience. Or yourself, because you keep handing over pieces of your life in order to preserve an image of goodness that is leaving you empty. Guilt often accuses you of being selfish precisely when you begin to act with justice. And that confusion is dangerous, because it makes you feel guilty for doing the bare minimum a healthy life requires, recognizing yourself as someone who also matters. Choosing yourself does not mean you stop loving. It means you stop using love as an excuse to disappear. It means understanding that your exhaustion also deserves respect, that your time also has value, that your peace is not a currency you must spend to buy acceptance. For years, perhaps you learned to believe that if someone was upset by your boundary, then the boundary was wrong. But sometimes the other person's discomfort does not reveal your injustice, it reveals their habit. It reveals that they had become far too comfortable with a version of you that did not protest, did not ask, did not interrupt, did not step away. There is a kind of justice that arrives late, but it arrives from within. It does not come with applause or family permission or a perfect explanation everyone accepts. It comes when you begin to correct the way you have treated yourself, when you stop speaking to yourself as if you always owe a little more, when you understand that you cannot live forever paying an emotional debt no one has known how to calculate, but everyone seems willing to collect. And yes, some will say you have changed. Maybe they are right. What they may not understand is that you did not change to hurt anyone. You changed because staying the same was already hurting you. Moving through that guilt requires quiet firmness. Not theatrical hardness, not bitter rebellion, not a dramatic declaration, so everyone finds out that now you come first. Sustained decisions are enough. Reply later, rest when you are tired. Stop justifying every boundary as if you are asking for absolution. Let some people get used to a version of you that is less available and more true. Because choosing yourself is not betrayal when you have spent years leaving yourself last, it is repair. And when you begin to repair yourself, you also begin to discover who was with you out of love and who was simply comfortable with your self-abandonment. When a person begins to live with more truth, it is not only their schedule, their responses, or their boundaries that change. The entire atmosphere of their relationships changes. Some become more honest, cleaner, more mature. Others begin to creak like old wood that was only still standing because you were carrying too much weight. And that creaking is frightening because it confirms something many suspect, but few want to face directly. Not every bond was attached to you. Some were attached to what they could get from the version of you that never said enough. Here, we enter the sixth principle of this video. The inevitable price of starting to live for yourself. Relationships that will not withstand your authenticity. At first, other people's reactions can seem confusing. People who once called you kind begin to see you as difficult. Those who praised your patience now say you are cold. Those who benefited from your understanding begin to talk about your pride. And it is curious, almost poetic, that your dignity becomes a problem precisely for those who never had a problem with your exhaustion. While you were available, you were noble. When you begin to protect yourself, you become complicated. What a beautiful measuring stick, always so generous when measuring what benefits them. This is one of the most delicate moments in the process, because you can interpret other people's distance as proof that you made a mistake. Someone pulls away, and you feel the urge to return to the old version of yourself just to restore peace. Someone gets offended and you begin to doubt. Someone accuses you of having changed, and guilt knocks on the door again with its admirable punctuality. But not every distance is a loss. Sometimes it is a revelation. Sometimes the relationship is not breaking because of your boundary. It is simply showing itself for what it was once it stopped receiving what it expected. Epictetus taught that it is not events themselves that disturb people, but the judgments they form about those events. That phrase, spoken by a man who knew slavery and still spoke of inner freedom, carries a special force here. Because the external fact may be that someone gets upset, pulls away, or judges you, but the judgment you form about it determines whether you experience it as condemnation or as clarity. If you interpret every distance as abandonment, you will go back to begging for presence. If you interpret it as information, you will begin to discern more clearly, and that discernment changes everything. There are people who love you, even if they struggle to adjust to your boundaries. Your change may make them uncomfortable, but with time they try to understand it. They ask, they listen, they adjust, perhaps they stumble, but they do not try to punish you for existing differently. And there are others who do not want to understand anything, because understanding would mean losing privileges. They do not argue with your boundary because it seems unfair to them. They argue with it because it removes their access. How do you tell one from the other? Watch whether the person wants to know you better or only wants you to be useful again, the way you were before. When you begin to live for yourself, some relationships go through a test of authenticity. History, habit, family ties, years shared, or beautiful words are no longer enough. Now something more concrete matters. How someone reacts when you stop giving them what they used to receive without effort. That is where the true texture of the bond is revealed. Some people move closer to your humanity, others mourn the loss of your function, and although this hurts, it also frees you. Because nothing is more exhausting than sustaining relationships where you are loved only as long as you do not inconvenience anyone, as long as you do not ask, as long as you do not change, as long as you remain a manageable version of yourself. You do not need to hate those who cannot withstand your authenticity, nor do you need to chase after them to explain your process with 20 carefully prepared speeches, as if you were defending a thesis before a panel of people used to benefiting from your silence. It is enough to watch. It is enough to let their reactions speak. Stoicism does not teach you to become indifferent to affection. It teaches you not to hand over command of your soul to every reaction from others. Because if every gesture of disapproval sends you back into obedience, then your life is still being governed from the outside. The price of living for yourself may be losing certain kinds of closeness, certain approvals, certain places where you used to fit because you made yourself small. But you also gain something beyond comparison. Truer relationships, cleaner silences, a presence less divided. Whoever truly loves you will have to know this fuller version of you. Whoever only loved your availability may leave in search of another source of comfort. And once you have seen this price, the highest understanding of the journey remains. You do not choose your life to create absence in others. You choose it because it was always yours. After everything we have walked through, a very human temptation may appear, using your new life as a kind of silent message to those who did not value you. Living better so they will see, pulling away so they will feel it, choosing yourself so that one day they will understand what they lost. And although that fantasy may seem fair after so much waiting, it still leaves your life tied to the same place as before. The strategy changes, the tone changes, the posture changes, but the center is still someone else. That is why we have reached the seventh and final point of this video, the highest truth. You do not live for yourself, so they will miss you. You live for yourself because that was the point from the beginning. At first, wanting someone to regret it seems like a way of taking back power. After years of invisibility, the mind imagines that scene with almost cinematic precision. The message that arrives too late, the call with a different tone of voice, the look from someone who finally understands the sentence you waited years to hear. And of course, part of you thinks the wound would close there. That if someone recognizes your worth, then everything will have made sense. But be careful, because that fantasy can become another elegant chain. You are no longer waiting to be loved. Now you are waiting to be mourned. Very different in appearance, quite similar underneath. True freedom begins when you stop organizing your life around someone else's reaction, even when that reaction would please your wounded ego. Because if you live better only so someone will notice, you are still asking for witnesses. If you change only so someone will regret losing you, you are still giving them a seat at the center of your transformation. If you build peace with the secret hope that someone else will suffer your absence, your peace still depends on their awareness. And that dependence may dress itself up as dignity, as pride, as strength, but inside it is still waiting for outside confirmation. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his meditations that soon, everyone will have forgotten everything, and soon you too will have forgotten many things, which is why it is best to act rightly now, without expecting any lasting reward. He did not say this out of contempt for others, but from a deep understanding of human impermanence. Recognition arrives late, arrives incomplete, or never arrives at all. Other people's memory is fragile, their regrets are unstable, their changes are not under your command. Are you going to hand over what remains of your life to such an uncertain possibility? Are you going to keep measuring your worth by other people's ability to feel your absence? Living for yourself is something much cleaner. It is waking up in the morning and asking what kind of life you can inhabit more honestly. It is caring for your body, your time, your home, your thoughts, your decisions again. It is recovering a simple desire without having to justify it to everyone. It is no longer explaining every move as if you were asking permission to exist. It is even loving better, because you no longer love from the need to be recognized, but from a presence that is less hungry, less resentful, less willing to sell itself for crumbs of attention. And here something beautiful happens, even if it is frightening at first. When you stop living to provoke a reaction, your life begins to gain a different kind of weight. You no longer need someone to miss you in order to know you were valuable. You no longer need someone to come back to confirm that you deserved respect. You no longer need others to make a solemn act of understanding in order to allow you to move forward. Your value does not appear when someone discovers it. It was there even when no one was looking. What changes is that you finally stop abandoning it yourself. This is the highest point because it dismantles the original fantasy. Maybe some people will miss you when you change. Maybe others will not. Maybe someone will understand too late. Maybe no one will say anything. But if your life depends on that, you will still be sitting in the same waiting room, only dressed more elegantly. The real exit is something else. To live because you are alive. To choose because you can choose. To reclaim your place because you never should have handed it over completely. Not to get revenge, not to impress, not to provoke nostalgia, but because every day you still have is territory that belongs to you, and no one should occupy it in your name. If you have made it this far, you are already part of a minority that does not settle for soft explanations or quick comfort. You have held a difficult gaze, the recognition that a life can be lost not only through great tragedies, but through years of availability, waiting, guilt, and silent surrender. Today you saw that invisibility often begins when a person stops choosing themselves, that patience can turn into self-abandonment, that the comfort others find in you can destroy respect, and that resentment appears when your inner life has been asking for justice for too long. Now, one intimate decision remains: to keep waiting for others to wake up, or to begin living with a clarity that no longer depends on their delay. If you have stayed until this moment, there is something in this message that deserves to remain with you. But remember, wisdom does not transform you because you heard it once. It transforms you when you practice it. In the Stoic Library of Self-Respect, I brought together 5 books to help you apply Stoicism to family, loneliness, boundaries, and self-respect. You can find it at thestoicgarden.com. And before you continue, let me know in the comments how you are today, what country you are listening from, and which part of this video spoke most deeply to your life. My name is Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. This channel exists to look at adult life with greater firmness, to turn pain into discernment, and to remember that ancient wisdom is useless if it cannot help you in a difficult conversation, in a painful boundary, or in a decision you have been postponing for years. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper on this path, not to collect videos, but to build a firmer way of living. Share this message with someone dear to you who may also be waiting too much, because sometimes a clear word arrives right when a person is about to keep abandoning themselves out of habit. And now on screen, 2 recommended videos will appear so you can continue this journey toward a life with more character, more inner peace, and more Stoic wisdom.